Hello there, Robert De Nardis here from GEMt International. Thank you for tuning into this month's podcast. Again, we've searched far and wide to bring exciting people to you and interesting topics to the table. People who can think outside the treatment cubicle and make the most of their profession. And hopefully it inspires you, and hopefully you enjoy this month's edition of the GEMt podcast. Hi there, I'm here today with Kayla Mattiazzi. Now, I know Mattiazzi isn't your surname now, but I always met you as a Mattiazzi, and I'll always think of you as a Mattiazzi.
Once a Mattiazzi, always a Mattiazzi, they say.
That's it. And I remember it because it reminded me of a Maserati, which is often as fast as you talk sometimes. So, Kayla, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been a physio for about 5 years now?
That's correct, yes.
Yes, and I know you've done a lot in your career. You've worked in private practice. You've been
That's
a
correct.
FIFO physio as well.
Yep.
I believe that finished just recently. But more importantly, and the reason why you're our podcast feature this week is that you're a GEMt instructor. And I thought it'd be interesting for our listeners to find out what's involved in becoming an instructor, because we've put a bit of work into supporting our support team. And you did I think you did your level 1 pretty much as a new grad in 2020, is that correct?
Yeah, in my first year out, yep, within 6 months, I think I was doing that one.
Yeah, at Bribie Island. I might just start with, what made you do that course 6 months out? Was it recommended to you, or was it
Yeah,
on your own
that
back?
was recommended to me by my boss at the time. She said, "No, you have to go and do GEMt." She'd done, I believe at that stage, she'd done level 1 and 2 herself, and she said that it was, out of the courses she'd done, it was definitely the best in terms of what she was getting results-wise with her patients. So she said, "Go off, do the course," and yeah, the rest is history.
And you've done level 2 and 3, and I believe you needle on a very regular basis.
I do, yes, yep.
Okay. All right. So I wanted our listeners to understand perhaps the steps involved in becoming an instructor, and just so people are clear. So an instructor is someone who literally roams the room and gives assistance where required. And once someone's been an instructor for a period of time, and it usually just depends on their own commitment and level of development, but we develop them into demonstrators. So those who have done the course will know that a demonstrator is the person who has a group of 10 delegates around them, and they've got to have a greater understanding of anatomy. They've got to be able to obviously command that group. And once people are demonstrators for a while, we look for those who have potential to be a presenter. And that's the person out the front with the microphone. And that's usually me. So it's not easy for me to give that role up. But we start by having a co-presenter where we share the role, and then we develop them into presenters. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But Kayla, you were on the level 1 course. You were identified as a potential talent, as someone that I thought would enjoy being an instructor. And I have to admit, when I email you or text you to say, "Are you available?" Your level of enthusiasm sits on top of the list for wanting to be involved. Tell me, what did you think when I first approached you, and why do you enjoy it so much?
Yeah, I think initially you get a little bit of that, let's call it imposter syndrome, because, at the time you're a fairly inexperienced needler compared to the likes of perhaps Nikki and yourself. And I think I struggled with the concept of finding myself capable enough at that point to actually instruct others. But
Mhm.
the amount of support from like yourself and Deb and Nikki was overwhelming. Like I remember you mentioning something along the lines of us being the experts in the room when it comes to needling. And I sort of went, huh, like when I thought of it in that context, that was a lot more helpful because, some of the delegates have perhaps never handled a needle before and they're performing techniques, for the first time that I'd done over and over and over again. So I think you providing that perspective and reassurance was really helpful. So although you initially compare yourself to like yourself and Nikki, that's not really a relevant comparison in the context of being an instructor. So there was that to begin with. But then, when you think about it a little bit more, you sort of go, huh, this could be really fun. So
Well, I like to think it's fun. We try to make the most out of the program. And you're right, when we first approach the potential instructor, they tend to look up the highway instead of over their shoulder, because that's all you need to do. And really, anyone who has competently finished a level 1 program could assist. on the future level one program because
Yeah.
they know more than the person that they're talking to.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and I also say, I send you a few emails beforehand as well to fine tune things. That if someone asks you a hairy question, you've got plenty of support. You're never going to be sitting there on
That's
your
right.
own. Right?
For sure.
Have you had any obstacles, like as an instructor? Have you found yourself going, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing here?" And had any of those moments?
I don't think any of those moments in particular. I think you probably remember more recently. I actually was I was an instructor for a level one course, and my boss at the time was actually doing the course as a delegate.
Wow. Yes.
She is amazing. She actually sort of thought of it as master and the apprentice in the context of needling because she had seen me work with so many of my patients and sent so many of her patients to me because she didn't do GEMt dry needling. And I would treat her patients. And even if I handed them back to her after I had treated them with dry needling and she progressed on with her rehab, she could see how much benefit it was giving her
Yes.
patients. So that was a pretty a wacky one for me, having to instruct or be an instructor to my boss of 4 years or however long I was with her. So yeah,
I remember that now, and I actually remember thinking that both of you handled it pretty well because you've got to have a level of maturity to be able to do that.
absolutely. Yeah.
That's that's probably as challenging as it gets, Kayla. I've got to say. Um, Look, it gets tricky as well. Like we get people who've got 30, 40 years of experience as a therapist. We
Yep.
get doctors. We've had sports physicians as well, and we just got to be mindful that they are there because they want to learn something that you know more about. So, regardless of their areas of expertise and how far they've gone down their career pathway, the only reason why they're at the course is because you know something that they don't. Um, so, look, when um, when we're looking for a potential instructor, I'm looking for someone who shows maturity on the end of a needle. If they've got some life skills, that's always great. They don't have to have had experience necessarily, and I don't think I even asked you if you had any teaching
Yeah.
experience.
That's actually one of the things that I was probably again quite shocked by when you asked me because I was thinking, oh look, I'm a fairly new physiotherapist as far as the profession goes, and yeah, that's I guess why I was wanting some more of an idea as to why you chose me and what you're looking for when you're on the hunt for instructors. Like, what's your selection criteria, I guess.
Sure. Well, I'm looking for people who are engaged on day one. I'll never forget, uh, Kayla, you're someone who gets a lot of eye contact. So, and that tells me you're either asleep with your eyelids open or you're actually very interested in what I'm about to say. So, look, I'm a little bit old fashioned. If I see people on their phones, I'm thinking, if you'd rather be somewhere else, go somewhere else. But when
Yeah,
people are sitting up in the front and they're engaged and looking like they're interested, then we make notice. Now, maybe I noticed you because I think you were the only girl on the course up at Bribey Island. So
yeah, I was actually.
I think it was a very male dominated group.
I'll
But
never forget when you you had to I had to be the I had to be the volunteer for when we were doing pecs and deltoids because you always demonstrate that on a female to show appropriate draping techniques and whatnot. I remember you pulling me aside at the start of day 2 and I thought you were going to tell me that I was failing and I needed to go home and and it was just to ask me if I wouldn't mind being the volunteer for that section of the course.
well, we do like people to be comfortable, that's for sure. So
For sure.
so first thing, I'm looking for people who are improving every day on the course. I'm looking for people who have a genuine interest, some life skills, some maturity, um, and I'm approaching people who I think have potential to be a demonstrator, not necessarily a presenter, because that's not for everybody. And look, physios, osteos, chiros, when we're in a room with a patient, we're in charge. You know what I mean? So some people seem to seemingly lack the confidence to step forward. And I say, well, listen, you're in charge every day. And if you're running Pilates classes, you're in charge of a small group. So we all have that leadership potential and leadership ability. So yeah, I'm looking for people who could command a room. So we approach our instructors, we find out if they're interested. I then send them a non-disclosure agreement because we do have a lot of intellectual property that we like to preserve. When that comes back, I will sit with them and have a chat, usually over Zoom or in person if I can. Particularly with our overseas instructors, we certainly obviously have a Zoom session with them, and I explain what our expectations are. And it's They've gone through the course. It's typically been done with me or one of our regional managers if it's overseas. So they've seen the level of professionalism. We deliver the course. We try to get a blend right of always being professional before we start to, look to speak for personalities or crack any one-liners. Um, and I just reassure them. I reassure them that on the first session, like I often tell them, the literature's out there. If we were the best presenters in the world, and if you were the best delegate in the world, you may retain 70% of what you heard on that first session. When you did your very first support role as an instructor, do you recall thinking to yourself, I must have dozed off at that point, or has Robert changed the program?
Genuinely, I was so angry with myself. I was like, "Why don't I remember this from when I was a delegate?" And it was just wild that first time that I instructed after the level 1, because when you're a delegate and doing the course, you're so caught up in trying to make sure that you're doing everything right, and there's so much information overload, which is amazing because obviously it's all good information. But being able to come back as an instructor was in a way a much more relaxed environment in which to consolidate that knowledge. And look, I learned something new each subsequent time that I helped instruct because the courses are constantly evolving and changing. So yeah, I found that pretty cool.
Yeah. Look, that's a common feedback that we get, and it's funny. Most instructors come out and say, "Oh, you must have changed the course." I mean, look, we probably only change it between 2 and 5% each time. There's always something evolving, a better way of doing something or some research, but otherwise it's fairly standard. And the other 28%, that was you dozing off at the wrong time. And that's the thing we try to get across to instructors is that everybody learns at their own pace. Everyone learns differently. And when you run a demonstration group, you can look around the group and some people are just watching. Some people are writing notes. And that's great. But while you're writing notes, you can't be listening to what I'm saying next. So, so we do. I think we support and offer a little bit of career opportunities for those that support us. We ask our instructors to help out for maybe 3, 4, 5 courses, and we see how they develop. We then spend some time with them, and we have some good resources on how to become a demonstrator. And we actually have a section on our website now in the members section that is exclusive for our support team. And it's got resources under the labels of instructor, demonstrator, presenter. So they all get access to all the videos. They get access to any support documents that we think might be some reminders of contraindications, precautions, some commonly asked questions are in there as well. The demonstrators get a little bit more information and they'll get the demonstration slides so they know which slide they're presenting on. There's a document on there that has every bit of vital information that must come out in each demonstration section. So it's scripted, okay, not word for word, but I literally tell my demonstrators, guys, the hamburger ingredients are pretty good. It's 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions,
Sesame seed bun. Yep.
but you can put your flavorings and toppings on top because we all have different styles. I say to them, look, if you find yourself uh, quoting me, that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? Because I put the course together and that's led to the success of the program. And there's nothing wrong with saying, Robert always says, da, 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 until you get your own anecdotal stories. So I'll have some classical stories about certain patients on certain muscles. And as you become more experienced practitioner, if your story's better and you know it better, because it's always going to be more genuine, then that's the story you present. So our demonstrators have access to audio clips of me doing demonstrations. There's a Word document which is quite detailed. It's about 14 pages of all the important points to get through on each demonstration section. There's a little guide in there on how to deal with, shall we say, challenging delegates, because we get them occasionally. And then our presenters get a bit more information, and especially the ones I can reach out to. We actually run some workshops with them. Nikki, that you mentioned in Queensland, she actually stayed at our place for a couple of nights. She was down in Melbourne to run some courses. And we basically played some games that have you thinking on your feet. Just a little bit of fun on just being able to think on your feet, change direction on your feet, and doing some public speaking drills. So I have a very good document, I think, anyway, on presentation styles and how to take command of a room. So those of you who might remember, if I see you on your phone, I'm walking down your aisle, okay? And I want to see if you're going to stay on your phone while I'm standing next to you. So we've developed some really good resources, I think, to offer a bit of some career opportunities, um, because we want people to feel comfortable doing it. And that's your next challenge, Kayla. By the way, you've done a few courses now. I know you're assisting on the March course. So I'd like now to start you on a demonstrator's pathway, okay? Because I think you'd be good at it. And I wouldn't be asking you. And that's the thing. I don't ask people unless I think they could represent the company. We are literally an international brand. There's more people have done our program in Malaysia and Singapore than any other dry needling course. In Australia, we're getting very close to the top of the list as well. So that's something we're very proud of. So I guess part of this podcast is for people listening. If you think you've got the skills and you'd like the challenges of being involved in that pathway, and again, it would be if you believe you have the ability to be a demonstrator. So we do have plenty of instructors, and that's a fulfilling role. But if you can get to a demonstrator, that's next level, and that's something we're very happy to support people. Um, Kayla, what else? What other advantages have you noticed in being a GEMT needler and or instructor? I want to know: are you leveraging this to your advantage?
Oh, hell yeah. It's so interesting because you often come across, I'm sure you get this all the time, you'll come across the little, speed bump when you're treating patients of, "Have you had dry needling before?" "Yes, I have. It doesn't work for me." And so then you've got to go down the pathway of sort of trying to get them on your side and educate them, about the different styles of needling and how GEMT is different. And I guess then when you finally, you know, get your foot in the door with them and have the chance to use needling as part of your treatment with patients, and then they see the benefits of it, that's pretty cool. So being able to, I guess, redirect someone's thought process regarding needling and say they've had a bad experience or an unsuccessful experience with other styles of needling in the past, being able to introduce them to GEMT style of needling and how widespread the benefits can be. Then they go, "Oh, can you needle my shoulder? I've had this shoulder problem for so long." And so we get down the weeds in terms of other areas of the body that they might like treated. So I found that incredibly beneficial. Um, and as far as being an instructor goes, I guess it's just like the feel good aspect of it, like giving back to the profession. Like, you've said many times before, knowledge is nothing unless you share it. So I think learning new skills as a practitioner not only helps to prevent practitioners from getting stale, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, like it keeps us fresh, but it also, ensures that our toolkit is up to standard and we can be, helping as many people as we possibly can. Like you're not using needling on every single patient, but if you've got that in your toolkit and you're good at it, it makes you a standout. So um, I guess also learning to be a better educator as well. When you're instructing others, it helps you to become a better educator, which again has a flow-on effect to your treatment as a practitioner. Because education is such an important part of our profession. So yeah, that's probably some of the main highlights for me. And then all the educational resources online as well as on the members part of the portal. So I really always enjoy sort of refining techniques, and if I forget a technique, I can always go back and review it. So yeah.
Well, the good news on that is once you become a demonstrator, you actually get free membership to, yeah, there you go. So there's another little incentive for it. In fact, we do try and look after our demonstrators. Free membership they certainly get. Also, we give them a certificate, and we frame it so they can put it up on their wall in their waiting room to literally say that they are a demonstrator on advanced GEMT dry needling programs. And when you're talking, you talk about communication, you talk about education. That's the essence of every relationship you're involved in, right? So it's important when you're in a cubicle with a patient. It's important with your hubby Tom as well. Education, because most men need to be educated, schooled, but
I was ready
yes,
for it.
but communication obviously is the essence. And I think um, once you start to teach, it's the best way to consolidate skills.
Yeah.
Like I run a workshop on TMJ because I used to be hopeless at it. Right, I hated treating TMJ, so I went and did a few courses, and then realised, gosh, it could just be packaged better. And so, I run a one-day workshop on TMJ that I think is just like the GEMT program. I think every second sentence is a take-home message, and that's how we've really put the program together. So we put a certificate together for demonstrators, and last year I also gave an educational financial contribution to every demonstrator in every country. So we just contributed, and we said we'd give them some support, some financial support to do any course that would make them a better needler or educator. So some people did put the funds towards an advanced course, some people put the funds to our MOBS or MANIPS course, um, and some people did things to do with public speaking, for example. So that was something. I'm not saying I'm going to do that every year, demonstrators, so don't get too carried away. But look, another great advantage, and the other thing when you're talking about with your patients, Kayla, don't be afraid to say dry needling. And when the patient goes, "Oh, what's all that about?" What are the ramifications? Oh, I heard it's dangerous. You go, look, it can be dangerous, but for what it's worth, I instruct on on a course that is internationally acclaimed. Do you know what I mean? You need to be proud of the fact that you're a GEMT instructor. And if we can get that demonstrator certificate on your wall as well, then the person in the waiting room's read it before you've introduced it. And they've got time on their
Already
phone.
got some
Yeah, they've got time on
peace
their
of mind.
phone to look into it. I'll tell you another highlight we had this year, which was actually with a young instructor. And she told me she's got family in Singapore. And I said to her, we run courses in Singapore. And within about 3 months, she coordinated a trip back to see her family in Singapore around one of our courses. I contacted my regional manager in Singapore, and here was this girl in Adelaide who was only a couple of years out that was able to assist on a course in Singapore. And we'll talk about the tax benefits in our business webinar podcast. Uh, but look, there are, and I'm not saying everyone who becomes a demonstrator gets to travel on the big bird with us, but I've certainly taken demonstrators with me to Singapore, Malaysia, and there's always possibilities there. And as I said to you, I think you and Tom are travelling for 6 months, leaving mid-year. If you can,
Yes.
well, Singapore's a great stopover, so I would love to run a course with you. Now, didn't you recently be apply for a job and get interviewed for a job with a GEMT needler? And that, well, I'm going to say it may have helped secure the deal a little bit.
Definitely, yeah. He was very his eyes lit up when I told him that I was a GEM team needler. I don't actually know how it came up, but I think he might have been asking about my skill set, and I said, I do Pilates and
Yeah.
dry needling, and the dry needling, his ears perked up, and then we started chatting about GEMT and how he knew you and whatnot. So that was definitely a little foot in the door for me.
So there are some advantages in knowing me. Great. Finally.
Absolutely. Aside from getting to listen to your jokes on repeat.
Okay. Okay. We'll talk about it. Look, it is, as I say to the instructors, it is a script, right? It is a performance. And I often, do you remember the story I told you about Delta Goodrem? Do you remember that one? I'm going to tell you right now. If you don't, here I
I
go.
don't. I do not. This is
Okay.
what I mean. It's why I got to come back and instruct.
So, so often when I'm in Melbourne, for example, I have the same team supporting me, right? And sometimes I hear myself saying the same jokes and the same one-liners, and I feel for them because they've got to go, they're going to turn into my kids going, not him again. Anyway, then I went to watch the production Cats, and Delta Goodrem was the main cat. Don't ask me what her name was, but anyway, Delta Goodrem. And we went there on a Sunday matinee, and she'd been on Friday night, Saturday night, and now she turns up at Sunday midday. Anyway, I had an aisle seat. At one stage, her character walked down the aisle and happened to stop right next to me. Now, I say she spotted me in the crowd, but apparently it's just a rip. But anyway, that's up for debate. She stopped and sang to me pretty much, right? Eye to eye contact. And she sang to me as if I was the only person in the auditorium. And this was her third show in under 48 hours. And it dawned on me that she's working from a script and it's a performance. And that's what it is to be a presenter for GEMT. We work off pretty much off a script with a formula that works well. It's being run in Singapore, it's run throughout Malaysia, throughout Australia and New Zealand. And collectively we'll make a change together to the script. And it made me a better presenter. And I thought, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing. I'm providing education. I try to provide a little bit of entertainment as well, as you know. And it's a performance. And the people in that audience They don't care that I've done it 6 times in the last month. They're there and they expect the best of us, and that's why I'm looking for people who can produce the goods when they need to. And that's why we chose you, Kayla Mattiazzi. I want to thank you for your time today, okay?
Privilege.
All the very best in your career, and I look forward to developing you into a demonstrator.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Thank you so much.
Good on you. Well, thank you for joining me and listening to our GEMt podcast of the month. I trust you found it insightful and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed being part of the interview process. Members get access to all our podcasts and playbacks, plus so many other features on our membership site. So if you'd like to be a member, by all means contact us. Thank you again for being part of GEMt International and supporting us, and I look forward to joining you on our next episode of GEMt Podcast.